People move to Seattle by the hordes, trying to get back to nature. On the weekends, every last one of them heads for the mountains. It was nearly impossible to find a place to park at the trailheads. I bumped into more people on the trails than at the mall. I tried to get away from them by going cross country, but after 100 yards of hacking through the underbrush, I was so tangled in vines I could barely move. I joined the masses back on the trail. I longed for my glacier-swept Sierras, where I could saunter in any direction across smooth granite. On one backpack trip, while in Seattle, I spent a long, hard day hiking to Big Heart Lake. When I arrived, the camping area was covered with tents. I hunted around and found a semi-secluded spot near a tree. After pitching my tent, I sat down to make dinner. The mosquitoes were so thick I had to wear a net over my head and gloves on my hands. I felt like an astronaut in a spacesuit. To eat, I shoved food through the net and into my mouth, trying not to let the mosquitoes in. The buzz was deafening, not so much because of its volume as because of the rapacious intent it signified. Selfish little bastards, swarms of them, all wanting a piece of me. In place of a thank you, they left an itchy welt. I studied the little vampires crawling and poking on my outstretched legs, trying to pierce my nylon pants. A dozen gathered in a clump, and I unleashed a murderous swat. It was satisfying and pointless. What's infinity minus 12? The next day, I stopped along the trail for lunch. As I munched trail mix in the warm sun, I admired bees buzzing around brightly colored flowers. Like mosquitoes, they would sting, but only if threatened, and the attack would cost them their lives. That seemed more than fair. Plus, I could see the point of bees. They pollinate flowers. But at the core, weren't they just like mosquitoes, hungry for pollen instead of blood? And how was I any different? Didn't I like to sink my teeth into a juicy steak? There was no escaping it. Hunger, not love, makes the world go round. Or maybe love is just another word for hunger. I felt this in Seattle traffic. I consider myself a kind and benevolent soul. But if some fool races past me and tries to squeeze in at the last second, I leave no gap. I stare straight ahead as they honk and beg for an opening. Not on my watch. One evening, I was at the Seattle airport, studying cars as they swarmed around the few remaining parking spaces. Their fronts looked like the mouths of locusts. They said, "Move it or lose it." Evidently, when God commanded Adam to kill and eat, he accidentally hit CC all. We're all cursed with teeth and appetite. Our lives are an episode of the Hunger Games. I called this third specter Rapax, like rape, like predation. Rapax was the hardest to face because it destroyed my most cherished illusion, that I am a good and loving person, and that there are other good and loving people who put me before themselves. But every motion in the universe is fueled by desire. It's as inescapable as gravity. Love is just desire masquerading as virtue. My old friends genuinely cared about me, but their desire was to restore me to my Christian faith. Without that, I was anathema to them. As for my parents, how could I be anything but an offense if I told them that all their years of dutifully taking me to church had led me down the wrong path? Julie deserves a medal for sticking by my side, but even she had her limits. Our meager retirement savings gave her nightmares of dying in a rancid nursing home, being tossed in an unmarked grave. She held true to the wedding vow for richer or poorer, but it wouldn't go on forever. It was time to get my act together. In church, I used to preach about unconditional love, but I never met a parishioner without an agenda. If that agenda went unmet, they complained. If that didn't work, they packed and left. And what about God? Well, God was the worst of all. Anyone who failed to accept his Son burned in hell. There were three deep deceptions: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these was love. Love always failed. Again, I found the words of a children's song on my lips. Nobody loves me, everybody hates me, guess I'll go eat worms. The death of love was even harder than losing my faith. It left me alienated from everyone and everything, even myself. When I judged people for failing to live up to my standard of love, I felt awful. My world shrunk because I cut them out of it. By refusing to love my enemies, I loved no one. In the Hunger Games, everyone is an enemy. There was a way out, though. I didn't have to judge. I could stop condemning people for being what I am and extend compassion. In a crazy world, how does it make any sense to condemn people for being crazy? We're all stuck in the same hopeless situation which none of us created or chose. Our common curse is our deepest bond. Judging comes naturally, but it leaves me miserable and on my own. I have a choice. I can stretch out my arms in compassion. I can treat people with kindness. This expands my world and feels wonderful. It's not that I have become a good person. I'm just as selfish as anyone else or anyone ever was. I choose compassion not because I'm better, but because it is.